Great. Well, thank you. Thank you to Jorge and everybody who helped set today's data. Women's History Month. We are in the middle of it now. I guess about 10 days in. There's been a lot going on throughout the country, a lot going on with LULAC in terms of different fights, litigation, in terms of like fighting regulatory stuff, fighting stuff at the state legislatures and the federal government, advocating on issues, being in the news. One of the stories I don't think quite often gets told is the role of women in the organization. I always say women are the backbone of LULAC, and quite often they really are the glue that holds the organization together. But I am excited today to have our national vice president for women, Ms. Lupe Torres, who's going to go on and introduce Dr. Orozco, our national historian. Um, this is one of the best things that we have as an organization is that we have 97 years of history, and there is so much that this organization has experienced, so much that it's learned from, and so much that guides, so much wisdom that guides us through as we go through this probably the most turbulent time we could possibly go through as Latinos. So it's exciting, and I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to kind of learn from our past and kind of wisdom that we can pick up for the future. So I will turn it over to our National Vice President for Women, Ms. Lupe Torres.
Thank you, Dr. Serrano. Good evening, all of you who are on the Zoom to celebrate with all of us the Women's History Month this month, as Dr. Serrano mentioned. And it is a great pleasure to be part of the National Women's Commission, who are all leaders in their own right. They have been presidents of LULAC, regional vice presidents all over the country. They have held all these offices from the local all the way to national. So it is an honor for the commission to be supportive and be part of this testimony, this wonderful presentation that we will be hearing from Dr. Orozco. And again, the League of United Latin American Citizens invites you today to, I'm glad that you're here to join us in this virtual conversation about the women who helped shape this movement. I'm going to introduce and say a little bit about our wonderful presenter, a little bit because we only have 1 hour today to go through the presentation and questions. And I and Dr. Serrano will kind of take the questions later at the end. We're going to have about 10 minutes to do questions. We're going to have the chat that you can answer or just raise your hand and you will be recognized. But a little bit about Dr. Orozco. Dr. Cynthia Orozco is our national LULAC historian, and beginning her career in 1978 as a sophomore at the University of Texas in Austin, Dr. Orozco has dedicated almost 50 years to the study of LULAC. The daughter of Mexican immigrants, she is from Cuero, Texas. She graduated from UT Austin and obtained her PhD at UCLA in 1992 as the 13th Chicana in the nation to obtain a doctorate in history. She has been a member of LULAC in Rio Dosa, Alamogordo, and Las Cruces, New Mexico, and is currently a member of Council 8 in El Paso. She has authored No Mexicans, Women, or Dogs Allowed: The Rise of the Mexican American Civil Rights Movement. Also, Agent of Change, Agent of Change, Adela Sklavente, Mexican American civil rights activist and Texas feminist, and pioneer of Mexican American civil rights, Alonso Esperales. And it is my distinct pleasure now to present Dr. Orozco and turn it over to her to start her live presentation. Dr. Orozco, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize because I'm overcoming a cough and a cold, but several phone calls and emails folks kept telling me, we really want to hear you and see you, so please come on regardless of your voice. So I am here today to really talk about a brief history of women in the LULAC organization. And believe it or not, this is the very first time that I have presented a historical overview of the broad patterns of women in the organization. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is talk about the stereotypes about women in LULAC. And let me first read to you what some of the academics have said over the years. In 1946, Ruth Tuck, a sociologist, reported, quote, "The LULAC women, as told by one of her interviews, all became pregnant and politically inactive." In 1971, the Chicano political scientist Ralph Guzman wrote the following: "In LULAC, women are channeled into ladies' auxiliaries away from the decision-making centers of the organization. Women rarely introduced their own ideas in organizational meetings, and they did not debate with men. Women seldom appeared in the Anglo world alone or with their husbands to demand social change." In 1976, an oral historian reported that LULAC women were a social gathering for women to drink coffee and get together. And as recent as 2018, a California feminist scholar said, even though they did not have a vote, the wives of LULAC were considered extensions of the husbands and were enlisted to assist in planning and implementing the organizations. So these are what some of the academics have said. And I would like to share now my PowerPoint. And I would like to continue to share with you what some of the both historical and current stereotypes of LULAC women are. First of all, there's a belief that Mexican American and Latina women have historically been passive, that we've been subjected to machismo and therefore submissive to men, that we have been apolitical, that we are ignorant, meaning lacking education, have very little intellect, have contributed very few ideas, and that we are typically wives and that we are all heterosexuals. So these are some of the stereotypes that we have about LULAC. But if we look at what has occurred in the past, we can see that there have been a few attempts to try to set the record straight. And I should mention that again, since LULAC is really a civil rights, civic, and charitable organization that is focused on action, LULAC has hardly had time to write its own history. Fortunately, in 1979, for the 50th anniversary, José Sandoval was commissioned by President Eduardo Peña to write a little book called Our Legacy, the First 50 Years, where he included a chapter on women. Also, another attempt by LULAC in 2007 at the National LULAC Convention in Chicago, the commission organized a panel on LULAC women pioneers. Luckily, I was at that event and took notes of what various women had to say there. Also in 2012, Sylvia Gonzalez of Houston, connected with the National Women's Commission, created a booklet of women's leadership positions. And although it was not as thorough as it could be now, and although it had some inaccuracies, it was still an important contribution in moving us toward where we are today. Folks can also access my website, cynthiaorozco.com, to see some of the articles that I've written over the years. that's very easy for folks to access at a later date. But today I really want to provide a brief timeline, a brief overview of the major patterns that we have seen in the history of women. First of all, we have exclusion, because when LULAC was created in 1929, it was created by men for men. However, as early as 1931, we start to see ladies' auxiliaries form. In 1933, women were given complete and equal status with men in the organizations. And in 1934, there was an official organizer called the Ladies Organizer General that lasted up until World War II. Starting in 1937, the position second vice president, it had already existed before this time, but for the first time it was held by a woman, Alice Dickerson Montemayor of Laredo, and thereafter it continued to be a position held by women. In the 1950s, we start to see what we call mixed gender councils. The thinking in the 1950s, again, before the gay liberation movement, was that there were two genders. So in the 1950s, we would have begun to see councils with both men and women. In the 1970s, because of the women's movement of the late 60s, and also because of the Chicana movement, we start to see feminist councils within LULAC. In 1970, the position of second vice president was converted with a new title, National Vice President for Women. And as early as 1978, the first National Women's Commission was created. It went defunct or not too active for a while and was reestablished in 2004. In 1996 to 2008, we saw 3 women who were elected national women presidents, the first ever. And then in 2006, we see the rise of LGBTQ councils. Now, let's focus briefly on the question of exclusion. Most of us are familiar with this particular photo, which shows that there's over 100 men here and not a single woman in sight. Despite the fact that this photo shows no women, we do know that women were both at the founding convention in February of that year, as well as this constitutional convention. We also know that there were people like Adela Slos Vento from San Juan, Texas, in the late 1920s, a graduate of high school around 1926, who began to join the men in some of their activities. And she joined LULAC efforts, despite the fact that throughout her entire life, from 1927 to the end of her activist years in 1990, she did not join LULAC, but she promoted LULAC, and she did the same kind of work that LULAC men and later women were involved in. This photo will also show that in 1930, if you look closely, you can see in the middle as well as in the front that women are active and participating at this Alice Convention in 1930. And we know that the women are there not just as family members, they could have been there as wives, sisters, relatives, but also as individuals who were interested in LULAC and who believed that the LULAC cause was their own cause. We also know that in this period of exclusion, that especially in places like San Antonio, there were women's clubs, that LULAC News, the news magazine reported to be helpers of our cause. So women were already organized and they were doing the same kind of work that the LULAC men were active in. Now, the next thing we see is the rise of ladies' auxiliaries. Now, the ladies' auxiliaries were few, but again, we have a stereotype that the typical way that women in LULAC have participated has been in ladies' auxiliaries. And even to this day, many people believe that women are still in mostly ladies' auxiliaries when they're in LULAC. But the heyday of ladies auxiliaries really was the 1930s. And here we can see the very first council was in Alice, Texas. Alice, Texas actually being the home of the principal founder of LULAC, Alonso S. Perales. Then we see also San Antonio, Kingsville. And then beginning in the mid-1930s, LULAC has expanded into New Mexico. And so we have ladies auxiliaries in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Las Vegas, New Mexico. And by 1939, 1940, LULAC has expanded to Colorado. And there is a Coronado club there that I believe has either they had some kind of ladies auxiliaries, or briefly women joined the ladies auxiliary and later they merged to be a mixed gender council. Now, one of the stereotypes of the ladies auxiliaries is that they're all wives, and this is not true. We have women who are single, who are not married, who are independent women who are involved. And one of the most interesting examples of this is a woman from San Antonio named Esther Perez Carvajal, who obtained a master's degree from the University of Chicago in the 1910s. So she would have been more educated than 98% of the other male LULACers in San Antonio. And one of the events that she organized was a musical and literary event with 200 people present. And it's also at this event that the very young high school student, Emma Tenayuca, presented a speech called I Am an American. This would have been years before she became a communist, again, a very young intellectual who was given an opportunity to speak at this event. So we can see that this is obviously an event organized for people and women of intellect. I should also say that the ladies auxiliaries, they also existed, especially again in Kingsville and San Antonio, helping to organize PTAs and also helping the LULAC with any needs at the time. The next development that we see are the rise of ladies LULAC councils. Now, the first ladies LULAC councils were created in Alice, Texas. Again, the home of Alonso Perales, the principal founder of LULAC. Then we see one in Goliad, and the women in Goliad, along with the men, did successfully desegregate the Mexican school in Goliad, Texas, with the assistance of a white ally there in town. Donna, Harlingen in the Valley, Del Rio, Mission also in South Texas, Falfurrias, Wichita Falls moving toward North Texas, El Paso, and McAllen. Now, the ladies LULAC councils were actually created through a resolution, and there was a district attorney, assistant district attorney named Joe V. Alamia and J.M. Canales of Edinburgh, who created and wrote the May 7th, 1933 resolution that, quote, permitting Latin American women to organize on the same basis as men and to be known as ladies LULAC councils. And we don't have any information that suggests that this caused conflict. However, we should also mention that it is interesting and important to note that LULAC did not create gender integrated councils in 1929 or 1933. So we do have to think, well, did the men in 1933 really believe that women were their equal? Did they not want to compete with women? Did they not want to be outdone by women? Did they want to have a separate boys' club outside of dealing with women when it came to civic and political issues? Now, the other thing we do know is that we have a few sources that do tell us about sexism in the LULAC organization. And one of the first stories we have is told to us by Alice Dickerson Montemayor of Laredo. And she wrote this in LULAC News. She wrote an article called Son Muy Hombres. And what she was talking about was the fact that women in El Paso, Ladies LULAC, had written the president several times, and 3 times, in fact, excuse me, and their correspondence was ignored. And so they figured, well, let's just cease being in operation. They're not paying attention to us. And so Alice Dickerson Montemayor wrote a stinging editorial that was accepted by LULAC News. At the time, LULAC News was being edited by J.C. Machuca of El Paso, who was a liberal toward women's participation. So he printed that essay, and this is what she said. It has been some talk about the ladies. There has been some talk about the ladies' councils of our league, or at least to relegate them to the category of auxiliaries. There is fear that our women will take a leading role in the evolution of our league, and that our muy hombres, our very much men, question mark, might be shouldered from their position as arbiters of the league. So she was the first feminist in LULAC. She was the first person to challenge sexism in the LULAC organization. We also know that in 1954, there was a woman named Tilly Gonzalez who had been elected a regional position in New Mexico. And this is what she reported happened. When the woman was elected, here she's referring to herself, the gentleman, one person, felt insulted to think that a woman would take his place in LULAC work. Let me tell you, never underestimate the power of a woman, for she can do LULAC work just as good or better than most men. I am not seeking re-election for regional governor. Okay, so you can see again, she stated her piece, but then she also said, hey, I'm not going to take this, and I am not running for re-election. We actually have very few statements in the LULAC documents and the LULAC News that talk very openly about sexism in the organization. But when we get to the 1970s, we start to get very active feminist councils that very much talk about the machismo in the LULAC organizations. Now, besides those ladies' LULAC councils that appeared mostly in Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado in the 30s, over time, we also saw more ladies' councils. And here's a few that I picked out. Here again, we have Albuquerque, Los Angeles. In Los Angeles and California actually organized 3 different LULAC councils in the 1930s, but did not become fully participatory and permanent in LULAC as a state really until after World War II. We also see in the late 50s, the Midwest is starting to enter LULAC. We're talking about Indiana, we're talking about Illinois, we're talking about Iowa. So you can see, again, here women are also organizing separate councils for women. Now, the other thing that folks don't realize is that there was, before World War II, there were specific organizers that were supposed to organize women. And that person was called the Ladies Organizer General. And that position lasted from 1934 until 1942. And the very first organizer was a man by the name of J. Lou Sines. Now, Sines was one of the main founders of LULAC. He was a teacher. He moved around a lot. So I really just say he's from South Texas. And he actually didn't even just teach in South Texas. He also taught in places like the New Braunfels area. Shortly after, he was organizer. A woman from Mission, Estefana Valdez, took the position. And then the third person was Esther Nieto Machuca, married to the J.C. Machuca that I had referred to earlier. Here's a picture of J. Lou Sines. And again, as I mentioned, he's one of the principal founders of LULAC, an activist really from the 1910s on, a very important individual and the author of a diary during World War I that has now been translated and issued by Dr. Emilio Zamora. Here's a picture of Esther Nieto Machuca from El Paso. I believe she maintained her Mexican citizenship. I don't have any proof that she ever became a U.S. citizen. Now, this again is despite the fact that officially LULAC in 1929 says you must be a U.S. citizen, but nonetheless, there are examples of people who were Mexicans who were active in LULAC. Here's a picture of Alice Dickerson Montemayor, another ladies organizer general, and as I mentioned, the very first feminist in the LULAC organization, and a very active writer for LULAC News. Now, another organizer we had was Fabiola Cabeza de Vaca. In LULAC News, you will see her name as Mrs. Carlos Gilbert, but in New Mexico, she is famous. She was a county extension agent. She wrote several books, one called New Mexico Cookery, and another one as a ranch woman called We Fed Them Cactus, but very active in LULAC in Santa Fe. Here we have a picture of a convention. I'm not quite sure what convention this is, but this is in Goliad. And again, you can see the women are there. Obviously, at this time, with women come the children. You even have a woman with a baby here. But you have, again, the cooperation, collaboration of men's and women's councils in Goliad, Texas. Here we have a picture from 1951 of several women from the Ladies LULAC Council number 22 in Houston, organizing a charity ball. And again, when we think about, LULAC women have done it all. LULAC women have raised funds for desegregation, particularly notable the Salvatierra versus Del Rio case in the early 1930s, the Mendez versus the Mendez decision in the Orange County area in California, and then the Delgado versus Bastrop case in Texas. Here we have a picture of women at the National Convention in Laredo in 1951. Here we have another picture of Ladies LULAC at a state convention in San Antonio. Now, unfortunately, for most of the photos that we have, pictures like this especially, we don't have the names of these women. Most of these women today would be deceased, but these are pictures of some of our early trailblazers. So the next development we have are what we call the mixed gender councils. And again, starting especially in the 1950s, this is the time when the thinking is that there's only two genders, men and women. Here we have a picture of a council at Fort Madison in Iowa in 1957. And in the middle, we have Susana Pavon, who is the first president of this council. It is unusual for the mixed councils in the 50s or 60s to have women presidents. They tended more so to be men. Here's another picture of a Davenport, Iowa mixed gender council, mostly men, but a handful of women in 1958. And then here we have a picture. This is from my hometown in Cuero. And the woman in the back, the third, that is my mother. So I'm a second generation LULACer. My mother belonged to this mixed gender council as a secretary in the 1970s. By the 1970s, it's very common to have the mixed gender councils. Now, while we have mixed gender councils, at the same time, we still have men that are often largely in charge of most of the national positions, not all of them, but most of them. So this 1955 picture shows you, for example, in the front, you see Alfred Hernandez to the left. The man in the middle, Oscar Larel, became a national president. Felix Tejerina, the last on the right, another national president. So again, very male dominated at the very top. Nonetheless, I have been surprised to find that there were a good number of women state directors before 1970. And look and behold, before 1982, and I focused here primarily on those before 1970, 1980, the women state directors that did exist. And I want you to take note that Arizona is the leader. It is not Texas. Texas, the machismo is thicker and the men are more resistant. And so Arizona comes out first, and then Indiana, Wisconsin, Arizona again, Texas, finally, 1969, Dolores Guerrero. In Colorado, Lillian Gutierrez, and way slow in California, Dr. Anita Del Rio. Here's a picture of Jennifer Montoya from Wisconsin. And then here's a picture of one of the Arizona state directors in 1967. Now, again, here's a typical scenario. This picture is an important photo. In 1982, the one woman you see here is Dr. Anita Del Rio, and she became the first woman state director in California. Now, in the same picture, on the very left, you see Pete Villa, who becomes a national president, Manny Marquez, who became a state director, Jose Velez became a national president. I also see in the very back, we have Ed Moraga back here, and we have also Hector Godinez, who also became a national president. So again, even in California, folks, you see the women were also very far behind in obtaining those positions. And that is why we start to see feminist councils. And so because of the women's movement and the Chicano movement, by the late 60s, early 70s, we see very overt, openly feminist councils who say, hey, we're not going to take this anymore. So in Houston, we see Dolores Guerrero and Olga Solis, Albuquerque, Mary Molina Mescal, Denver, Patricia Varela Rivera, and Dr. Alicia Curon. In Los Angeles, Alicia Corral and Sally Martinez. Now, when I was at UCLA, I knew and attended events with Alicia Corral and Sally Martinez. Now, as I mentioned, the second vice president, the name changed in 1970. So that was a continuation that since 1937, we have had this more or less position for women. And here again, you see the names of Patricia Varela Rivera, Julia Sosoya of Arizona, Lillian Gutierrez of Colorado, Chacha Lopez Benavides, Sally Martinez, and Lou Betancourt. Now, the National Women's Commission, some people believed it started in 2020, but no, it started earlier. And Ada Peña was the first person. Again, she was the wife of a feminist in the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, and also the wife of President Ed Peña. So she had power and authority to help create this. And again, here's some of the earliest National Women Commission leaders. And then, of course, over time, with growing women's involvement, because by the 1980s, LULAC is half women, and it's really not seen at the very top, not really until 1994, when we see the election of Belén Robles. And here you have a wonderful photo of the three women presidents: Belén Robles from El Paso in 1994, Rosa Rosales of San Antonio in 2006, and Margaret Moran in 2010 to 2014. Again, here we see Belén Robles. Most people don't realize that she was the first woman elected in any major civil rights organization at the time. Not even the NAACP had elected a woman national president, and she played a very important role in getting rid of the major LULAC debt and creating the permanent national office in Washington. Here we have Rosa Rosales, the second one, a major labor organizer, a very also important orator and leader, particularly bringing in more women into leadership positions. And then we have Margaret Moran, who creates the Emerge Youth Academy in Washington, and also creates permanently the National Women's Commission. Now, the other group of women that we don't see a lot of are women in the LGBTQ councils. As early as 2006, and really I should say as late as 2006, we see the formation of LGBTQ councils. This is the first council out of Dallas. And while I cannot speak to what gender these folks identify, if we assume that most are men and maybe a few are women here, then we can still see that women are outnumbered in these councils. Nonetheless, we have councils that, again, are all kinds of mixed genders, any kind of gender. And in San Antonio, we have the leader, Maria Salazar, with the Orgullo group in San Antonio. And then we have Dr. Nancy Vera in Corpus Christi with LULAC para Todos. Interestingly enough, this organization in Corpus was created after a very homophobic comment and action by a priest in the community. If you were to look at the internet and try to seek out images of LULAC women, this is the kind of image you might see today. But this is a far cry from the various kinds of organizations that we have had, from exclusion to women in clubs, helping independently, to ladies auxiliaries, to ladies LULAC councils, to mixed councils, to feminist councils, to LGBTQ councils. And I want to close now with some thoughts by Lucy Acosta, a major activist in LULAC from 1957 to 2008. She said in a speech, "Please permit me at this time to clarify one very significant point about the women in LULAC. There are many people who believe that we are just an auxiliary of LULAC and not allowed to have full voting privileges and do mostly what the men in LULAC allow us to do. There are thousands of women LULAC members in the United States of America, covering almost every state in the union. And I can almost guarantee you that each and every one of them is now engaged in some civic, community, education, or fundraising event. And I would go as far as assuring you that some women in LULAC is now running or planning to run for political office." So with Lucy Acosta's words, we can see that there is a long history of women in LULAC as strong, independent, important, intelligent activists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you so much, Dr. Orozco. Let me elevate. We have time for a few questions here. If folks want to raise their hand, and we can elevate them to ask questions, or we could also you can also put it in the chat as well. So feel free to. As a point of privilege, I'm going to ask a question. One of the questions I had is the labor movement at the time, and so what are the parallels? Because the way I see LULAC being a very big force politically and forcing the conversation about inclusion, but at the same time, labor rights was also forcing that conversation too. So to what extent do we see the parallels of LULAC leading the labor movements or labor movements leading in LULAC?
Okay, that's a very difficult question. And my first thought is to send you to my timeline that I have developed for National LULAC at the LULAC national website. But offhand, the most important thing I can think of right now, again, because there's so much, we're talking about so many years, is what LULAC did during the 1940s. And most people think that LULAC was defunct during the 1940s. And this is not so much what women were doing, but really the LULAC organization, period. And during World War II, the federal government, or I should say really Congress, created an organization, or not an organization, an agency called the Federal Employment Practices Commission, which we call the FEPC. And the goal of the FEPC was to take complaints of discrimination by race or gender and to report them to the FEPC agency. Dr. Carlos Castañeda, who is a historian at UT Austin, was the highest ranking Latino in that position. And they took numerous complaints that allowed for workers in places like New Gulf near Wharton, where people were working in a sulfur mine, to file complaints about lack of promotion, unequal wages. And it was a temporary organization because conservatives only allowed it during the war so that Black radicals, Black liberals, and the East Coast especially, would not protest during the war. But we got a few benefits from the FEPC. It really was the EEOC of World War II. But again, that's not something that conservatives wanted to keep after the war was over.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We have a few questions. I'm going to elevate Ms. Pagan first, and then we'll go to former President Hector Flores, and then Ms. Galvan, and then Irma Chuleta. So we'll go first to Ms. Pagan from Ohio.
Dr. Serrano, thank you, and Lupe Torres, VP, and Dr. Orozco, thank you for this presentation. And my question is, how do you see LULAC going forward in helping to nurture and grow the women's leadership and diversity in terms of the LGBTQ and youth in the LULAC organization? And how important do you see that, and do you see that growing?
Well, let me address the LGBTQ first. Sometimes historians or activists or ordinary people will say sometimes we have to listen to the silences. And if we are not having large numbers of lesbians in the LGBTQ councils or in LULAC, maybe there's a good reason for that. So I think that obviously, every council has to look at itself. We have to look at how we include, how we organize, which topics we address. Obviously, the question of youth is very important. Most of us know that the typical LULAC member is not somebody in their 20s and 30s. And obviously, many of us will phase out. So we do need to continue to create the youth councils. I think the college councils, college, young adult councils, those who are in their 20s or 30s, really another major focus needs to be placed on organizing those councils.
And if I may add, Dr. Orozco, and for Alicia's question, a great effort right now is being done by our national president and our CEO. They are starting to bring large group numbers of the collegiates into LULAC, and they are becoming more prominent, more involved. And I think that is an excellent sign that we will continue not only at our regional, but our national conferences. And then I wanted to say, Dr. Orozco, that the Women's Commission has been a great stepping stone for the other women to want to run for other national positions in LULAC, because they are already state directors or national VPs. And so I'm very, very happy to say that the Women's Commission is making great efforts in the women's effort of women leadership. Thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. I don't know. Didn't mean to interrupt you there. Who is your next up?
You're fine. I have President Flores here. Let me ask him to unmute. President Flores, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
There we go. There we go.
I wanted to say thanks for the great presentations thus far. And I wanted to say that the dates for election for Rosa and myself are incorrect.
Okay.
Dr. Orozco.
Okay.
I served from 2002 to 2006. So Rosa came after me.
Oh, okay.
And just for
Okay, I'll make that correct. Thank you for that correction.
And I am so glad that you mentioned Machuca and the kind of role that she played, because she played a very strong role. I had heard so much about her from my colleagues in El Paso. She was born in Chihuahua and admired the work that she did and stuck around with LULAC. The other item that was brought up, and that's the creation of LBGT chapter here in Dallas.
Mhm.
I was the president at the time, and one of the young persons there was a graduate from St. Mary's University, Jesse Garcia. And they were having there was a lot of criminal activity against the gays in that area, in the Oaklawn area. And they just couldn't get the police department to come in and do their job. So I told them, why don't you start a chapter? That way I can go to the chief or the commanders and have a meeting with the community, and maybe we can set a sort of a police station, but a small, they normally are able to work out of different areas. Set it up, a temporary deal. Meanwhile, you all can be on a committee to be interacting with the police department. But to their credit, they stuck with us. They did their job, and I've seen them grow.
Yes, I should also mention that I have recently completed a book manuscript on the evolution of gender and sexuality in the LULAC organization. And there is a dedicated chapter to the LGBTQ councils. You mentioned Jesse Garcia as the major founder, and I have obtained a wonderful testimony from him about how they got started.
Yes. The other item I wanted to mention that I think is very important, because former President Robert Ornelas, who was one of my mentors, graduated from my alma mater, St. Mary's University. But I know that when he was working for the Navy, I believe, in Washington, D.C., just like Ed Peña was one of the highest ranked Hispanics in federal government. And they were always working to try and make sure that our community was represented. So it came up that in Washington, they were going to come up with a law for those that needed a capacity training from the Department of Labor. So Robert was a very quick thinker, and he said that nonprofits ought to also be able to participate, and thus was born SER Jobs for Progress.
Okay, Hector, let's focus more on women today, if you don't.
Well, I'm just saying that because I heard the comments earlier from my colleague Pagan about, and mentioned about workforce and things of that nature. I bring that only to the attention that trying to respond how these things get started. Sometimes it's just a conversation. Sometimes you're able to make a difference wherever you're at, either civilly or in a job.
Thank you. We have Miss Lourdes Galvan. I want to elevate her real quick here. Ms. Galvan. And then I'm going to ask to unmute. There we go.
Did
There
you
we go.
unmute me? Okay.
Yes, yes.
It's Dr. I really enjoyed the presentation in the chronological order that you mentioned all the steps that we've been through for the past 97 years. But I've always wondered, because we hear about things that have happened back in the 30s, back in the 20s. But I feel that there has been a lot of other folks that have had an impact on changing and improving and making it better for women to be involved in LULAC. I'm very happy with the leadership that we've had, but I still think that there's still some unsung heroes along the way. And
Yes.
I'm hoping that somehow, in the future, as you're continuing writing all these manuscripts, that we capture some of those. And some of the, I know, I've heard people say, "Oh, my grandmother used to be in that. Oh, my tia used to," So those are not
Yes.
captured.
Okay,
So,
let me comment on that, please, if I
okay,
may.
sure.
One of the problems that we have is in the entire United States, we're about 120 Chicana historians, okay? And if we add Latinas, maybe another 20 more. So we're very few, and it takes a lot of work to do the kind of research that I have come up with. We don't have enough historians. So we need local councils, especially since we're moving toward the centennial. We need you folks on the ground to collect the histories. We need people to do oral histories, one-page stories. We need YouTubes. We need TikToks. We need folks to collect their materials and get them into the archives so somebody like me can use them. If we don't have archives, then it's not possible to write. A lot of people think, oh, you just get on the internet. No, it doesn't work that way. I have spent years and years sitting in a library archive to dig up one fact. So again, we need everybody's help to make sure that we have some of these profiles you're talking about. Let's see some other folks develop one page, one paragraph profiles on who are these key women in every community. Who are the key people? What are the key achievements for every council? What is a timeline, a one-page timeline for every council that we have? It's a lot of work, and we all need to help.
Thank you so much. And I think that maybe that's a good point, that maybe we need a class on how do we capture this information that we can be contributing. I know of one women's auxiliary. They're all gone, but I knew that they met, and there was, older ladies, but they were always doing something to raise money, or I can't remember their names. I mean, I'll try and remember, but I was thinking, as you were, talking about the auxiliary, this was the only one that I knew of. But I appreciate everything that you've done, and you really opened my eyes to the point that I say, there's got to be more. But you're right. It takes the village to get it done.
We need the village. We need the village.
Yes. Thank you so very much. It was
Thank you.
very,
Thank you.
very.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ray, do you see any other questions? I think Alicia has her hand
From
up.
Irma Archuleta has her hand raised.
Okay.
Yes, she does.
You're muted, Dr. Serrano.
Miss Archuleta, we'll just go Miss Archuleta first, and then we'll
Okay.
do.
Will you unmute me?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear
Okay.
you.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Irma Archuleta from the Long Beach Council 3309. I also serve as a commissioner for the Women and Girls Commission here for the Los Angeles County and for the city of Long Beach. And I want to really applaud this decision to have this historical presentation. Thank you, Dr. Orozco, for that presentation. Is that going to be available for us to share with our councils?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wonderful, wonderful. I also have one question. In your historical collection of data, have you come across any Latina, any Chicana women that were involved with the suffragette movement? We
Ye-
were doing a little bit of, inquiry a few
yes.
years ago, trying to find some. We
Yeah.
came across, of course, African American, obviously white women, but we could not find any
Yes.
names of Latinas or
Yes.
Mexicans.
I can't remember the website, but there was one who studied at UCLA, and seems like she had the name Guadalupe in her name, but I can't remember her full name. But the one that's known more prominently is Adelina Otero Warren in New Mexico, who was really
Oh,
the statewide head of the suffrage movement in New Mexico. And she ran for Congress in the 1920s, Adela Otero Warren. Okay, so
Adela Otero Warren.
Otero Warren, yes.
Okay, that's from my native state. Great. Thank you. But keep up the good work that your history recording. I know it's appreciated, and we'll try to help out as well by recording some of our history here in California. And I know our councils are very active. In fact, our council here in Long Beach is predominantly women.
Yes, and I should also mention, Irma, if you're not familiar, there was a very important manuscript written by Margie Aguirre from California called, I think it was called Patriots with Civil Rights. And it's really a history of LULAC in California, especially as connected to the Mendez case. Now, that's a good example where somebody did tons and tons of research, but it's not readily available. It was not officially published. And I think, at the time, it for some reason, it did not get out. But it's an important research tool for California.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I wrote down these names.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna ask one quick question that was put in the chat a while back, and then I will go to Miss Sasser, Swada Sasser. But one of the chats was asked from our vice chair for the Veterans Committee and Military Affairs, Danita James, in terms of the contributions of women in the military, women veterans, women in active service, and if there was anything you can expand on that.
I don't have any information at this point with regards to women in LULAC and veterans. But let me say this, again, going back to World War II, many people think that LULAC was defunct. This is a time when Ladies LULAC was stepping up to sell war bonds, to create gardens, to create bandages for soldiers. Ladies LULAC was extremely active during World War I. So despite the fact they're not veterans, but these are women who are patriots.
Thank you. And then we're gonna have Miss Sasser, and then I guess we can go back to Miss Pagan. So Miss Sasser, if I can ask you to unmute. Hello?
You're muted, Gloria.
Working. There it is. No,
There we
I
go.
just, first of all, I'm a big fan of Dr. Orozco. I have all her books, and but I wanted to thank her for being here today, and I really want to thank uh, Dr. Serrano and VP Torres because this is a wonderful program. I think this is something as women we need to be able to understand that we have a role here. It took us a while, but we have a role here, and it just really made me proud to see all these women and see how far back it went because I didn't think women were involved in LULAC till like in the 70s, which is when I started
Exactly.
hearing about them. But thank
Exactly.
you so much.
Well, and again, really, these are the kinds of things that students in the classrooms at all levels need to know that, Latinas have made a difference, have been civic agents, and have been intelligent and significant to our community.
I'm going to tell you that when I joined the council in Seguin, there were only 2 women in that council, in a council of about 50 men, and they never let them talk. Those of you who know me knows that never stops me. And so now it's more women than men, and they're moving forward, and they're doing a great job in Seguin. So, I think women are important. And they are the backbone, not only of LULAC, but the church, a lot of organizations. We get things done, don't we, Lupe?
We sure do. Thank you for those comments, Gloria. And I think Ms. Pagan is next. Dr. Serrano?
Yeah. Hold on, let me see if I can pass to it. Okay, Ms. Pagani, I
Can
think
you hear
you're.
me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. First, I just have to say again, thank you so much for this presentation, Dr. Orozco. I am so excited about the idea of creating our own repository of the stories of our women and then having a place to share that with national. So I hope that there will be a workshop in June to help us get started on this. And also, thank you for sharing the information on the suffragettes. Because here in Ohio, as State Director for LULAC Ohio, we're working with the League of Women Voters. And so to have that common ground there information just really excites me. So thank you so much for all your hard work. And
So
thank you again.
I should mention that several years back, one of the Dallas museums, the Holocaust Museum, sponsored a national Zoom on women's suffrage, and I spoke about Latinas in suffrage. So you might look for that as well.
We
Thank
have
you.
one last comment. I know we're a little bit over time here. Gloria Leal writes, our national council. Do you think LULAC National LULAC has evolved in recognition and in participation? And then before Ms. Valenzuela will kill me if I don't give a shout out. She's like, just a comment, President Margaret Moran, Emerge Conference was for young adults. And then she also wanted to just give a shout out to thank everyone for coming up. So I just wanted to just mention the last question and then last comment.
Okay. Dr. Serrano, if I may, if no one else is asking a question, I wanted to say that for the first time, the national board, we have for the first time our national attorney, Gloria Leal. We have also regional vice presidents. Many of them are women. So they again have stepping stones from the Women's Commission. And we're so, so proud that we have national positions and all women for the first time under President Palomares and Mr. Juan Proan, our CEO, Gloria Leal, Maggie Rivera, our treasurer, national treasurer, Emma Lozano, a regional VP, Ana Valenzuela, specialty vice president, Ms. Rizzo, our national parliamentarian, and our national chaplain, Hilda, and many more that have now stepped up to the national level for the very first time. That we have all these women, and I'm very, very proud of it. And again, Dr. Orozco, we cannot thank you enough. I think this was a wonderful stepping stone for us to continue this. And we expect that, yes, in June at our National Women's Convention, we will have a continued aspect of what has been started tonight. And I want to thank you very, very much on behalf of not only the Women's Commission, but I'm sure Palomares is from the National LULAC. And so again, thank you. And this is our stepping stone, and we will be seeing and working with you very closely. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Que viva las mujeres de LULAC!
Que vivan! I guess Dr. Serrano, I don't see him anymore. So I guess we are now ending this. And again, I want to thank everyone that came to listen and be part of this national presentation. And God bless you. And Dr. Serrano, I don't know, do you want to have any other closing remarks?
Yeah, I just wanted to just give a shout out to the Women's Commission. I have several events lined up for this month. I know I'll turn it back to our Vice President Torres to mention a few things that are happening this month. If you haven't got your tickets for Fort Worth, our national convention is in Fort Worth, Texas this year. It's from June 17th, Wednesday, June 17th through Saturday, June 20th. We are still kind of putting things together, and it's going to be very, very nice, very, very big. And so we're excited by that. So we will, I'll turn it back to Ms. Torres, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah. Well, again, I just want to thank everyone that is with us tonight, especially Dr. Orozco, who has done a marvelous, not only as an author, but a leader in putting the history of women in LULAC together. And I know that we will continue to hear more when she puts out her book that is still being finished. So again, thank everybody. And thank you, Dr. Orozco, again. And everybody have a rest of the evening. God bless you. And thank you very much for your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.